There's a whole new generation that's stepping into the decision-making seat. And they, like we want to receive information differently. We want to assess options differently. And we want to make decisions differently than our predecessors did. And on top of that, technology is changing so fast that companies, they're just not as keen on making these really big purchases that are going to take a long time to implement, because by the time it's done, they're already behind.
I'm Nicole McLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Our show consists of 3 parts. One, where we pull in other Composely team members to talk about content that matters to you, like a viral LinkedIn post or the latest trend. The second always includes an in-depth interview with a leading marketer sharing actionable insights and a little inspiration. And finally, you won't want to miss the last segment, aptly called Friends Matter, where we're shouting out some of your friends and mine for their content wins in B2B marketing. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together. All right, well, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to bring Amanda Cummings on the show. Amanda is one of our fantastic account executives, and we've had the opportunity to work together for about a year now. So, Amanda, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Excited to be here. This has been a long time coming and a lot of hard work by you. So honored to be part of the show today.
Yes. Well, one, I just think it's so great to have a sales perspective on a marketing podcast, because the sales and marketing relationship is so critical. But specifically, there was a kind of viral LinkedIn post 4 weeks ago, according to LinkedIn. You can see almost 2,000 likes, a ton of comments. But this guy, Evan, posted a laundry list of things that are not an MQL. And as a marketer, I mean, let's be honest, how many of these things are you like, oh my gosh, we got a new podcast listener? I mean, right now I'm very excited about new podcast listeners. But there's a live chat interaction, or they visited X number of times. Like, how many of us have lead scoring based on one, if not all, of these things that he's saying is not an MQL? And then this line is just really what stood out to me. Stop burning your relationship with sales. So, of course, I was like, Amanda, please join the show. Are we burning our relationship with sales? Like, what's going on here?
No, you know what? I think a lot of the points just reading through on what's an MQL and what is not an MQL is fair. But I have the understanding that when sales wins, marketing also wins. So I think for me, looking at these, I'm like, yeah, somebody clicked on an email link, probably not an MQL, definitely not an MQL. Understand excitement around it and priming somebody, to hopefully get ready to buy. But I think there's also a delicate dance of, is this person a serious buyer? Is this somebody who actually has the intent behind, what they're doing and interacting with, that makes it a relationship that should be introduced to sales to work through?
Yeah, I think that intent piece is what's so critical. Like, if they click on an email, that's not intent. It's really not. No.
And I also, in a sales dream world, of course, we want everybody to come to us ready to buy.
Silver
Here's my
platter,
credit card.
Here you go.
Tapping it on the counter. That would be a dream, but that's not always how it is. So I think it's aligning on the most important KPIs for measurement of, what we're learning when we're having conversations with sales prospects at kind of where they're at, in the process.
I appreciate you saying, like, yes, of course. I mean, marketing would love to deliver a ton of people that are just, here's my credit card, please swipe. But acknowledging that that's not the case, because I do feel like sometimes sales can have this opinion of like, well, if they're not at that point, like, I don't want to waste my time with them. So, I mean, I think as a marketer, like, one, I appreciate you saying that. But two, we have to be respectful of your guys' time too.
I also feel, I heard this the other day, but creating a buyer is what is sales job as well. So like, not everybody, while we want them to be ready to swipe their card, maybe they're like 50% of the way there. It's our job as sales reps to also help them understand, like, if you're on the fence, why you need the solution, why you need this content, bridging that gap and creating somebody who is, then a buyer.
Well, I also think while you have to define what is an MQL, and that should be determined in partnership with sales. That should be based on data. But I will say, for as much data as we have right now as marketers and as salespeople, it is also harder than ever to identify people who are ready to buy. I mean, there are so many stats saying, 70% of the sales process is happening before you ever identify their contact info, because they're reading, they're hearing about you in the market, they're listening to shows like this. So when you do finally get something that's attributable, like, oh my gosh, they clicked on this, or I can tell you this person took this action, while it seems small, I do feel like there's almost something as marketers now that it's like, okay, but finally there's something, because it's like we have all this data, but because there's so much noise and because there's so much opportunity to self-educate in the market, it also feels like, okay, well, finally we have them. Let's not attack them. We don't want to immediately go pitch them, but let's engage with them. Let's build a relationship. And that doesn't have to mean it goes to sales right away. I mean, marketing should still be doing some warm-up, creating that buyer, like you said.
Totally.
How do you find the balance? I know you've done a lot of outbound prospecting. Of course, we always use that term, like, what's the reason to reach out? What's the balance between, like, I saw you click this email. I mean, maybe you don't say that, but like, what is enough information from marketing that gives you that reason to reach out? That's at least something more than just, I found you on LinkedIn Navigator, or I found you in Apollo and you fit our demographics, versus like, they're not really ready because they clicked this email.
I think so. Let's say, a great resource, some of the one-pagers or product releases or anything that we know that is a link that they're clicking into that has, an FAQ, an explanation around, what is SEO or why do I need backlinking? Something that has like a specific kind of call to action within it. I think, then being able to pass that on to sales when I'm doing outbound, looking at what they've engaged with, and then building a use case, whether that's looking at their website, kind of seeing the strength of their SEO, their blogs, what they're doing, using those things in combination to kind of paint the picture of then why that person would need our services. So somebody engaging with a newsletter isn't exactly the reason that they're going to buy. I think that gives us an understanding, a little bit of a lift behind the curtain on, what they might be needing help with or what's interesting them at this current moment.
It's both departments coming together to paint that picture. Hey, they seem to be clicking on a lot of SEO or a lot of content or a lot of blog or whatever kind of a subsegment of your service might be. Hey, let's use that use case. Let's paint the picture of how we could help, because clearly there's something there.
Yeah, and I think that also then goes into, we know with outbound right now, it's tough. And having that level of personalization and then being able to then, hopefully get your foot in the door to understand any deeper pain, what's really going on, I think also sets you apart and sets you up for success later on in the sales cycle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Any advice, just while you have a hopefully very dedicated, focused listener base of marketers, like any advice you just give to marketers on having a good relationship with their sales team?
My biggest advice to marketers is trust your sales team. Again, like what I said in the beginning of this conversation is when we win, everybody wins. I want to turn leads that come into me into opportunities. Like if I could have 100% conversion rate of everything that was handed to me, again, is a qualified buyer, meets our requirements, that would be great. But when I do turn something, back to marketing, or it just isn't a fit, like it's nothing personal, I promise you, if they were qualified. So I think just like trusting your sales team members, just the way we trust marketing, if there is that balance between the two teams in harmony, and again, remembering that we all are working towards a common goal, that's my biggest piece of advice.
I think that is a great reminder and a great transition as we head into our interview. We're about to talk about a lot of different things, really, really strong interview here coming up, but aligning on those KPIs between sales and marketing. And again, making it's not personal. We all want to win. We all want every lead and every MQL and every SQL and every opportunity to eventually become a customer. But aligning on those KPIs, aligning what success looks like, and just knowing that we're in it together,
totally,
I think is important.
And evolving together as we kind of see, stuff shifting, kind of feedback, from the sales team, marketing, again, working collaboratively to reach that end goal.
I'm Kerry Penny. I'm based out of Chicago. I work for Valtech, which is an experience innovation consulting firm. There, I'm the global head of brand and content.
I did not realize you were in Chicago. I am in Indianapolis.
Oh, great.
But formerly the Chicago suburbs. So
Midwest is best. So it's great.
100%. Too many people sleep on the Midwest. It is great here. You should come try it.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's start with one of my favorite questions, which is just how did you get to your role currently and just a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. So, I feel like for everybody out there who is wondering when they graduate school with a marketing degree, like, what do I do now, especially when times are hard? I graduated like right when every marketing job was eliminated off the face of the earth. And so my very first job was actually starting a company with a group of people. And it was super fun. It was before QR codes were even a thing. There wasn't even mobilely responsive websites. You had to build separate websites for everything you did. What we were doing was creating digital websites en masse for mobile using QR codes to get there. And so that bridge from print to mobile to web, it was super fun. We were working with like print newspapers and real estate agencies. And I learned a lot about how do you run a company? How do you not run a company? And I really got to try out my marketing chops that I had learned in school. And from there, I just realized I loved the startup culture. Like I loved the late nights in the office. I loved being obsessed with the client. I just thought it was great to be in the tech space. I loved it. And so I spent a ton of time doing startup work. I ended up moving out to San Francisco for a little while, working in the ed tech space, and then ended up coming back to Chicago because full circle, Midwest is best, came back here. And I decided if I wanted to be down this path of CMO, I really wanted to have a broader experience within marketing. I didn't want to be pigeonholed into this like very niche startup, B2C. I had been doing a lot of like community management, social media work. I wanted to get broader. So I ended up going as B2B as you could even imagine and went to management consulting. And I really thought I would be there for a year or two, just sort of dip my toe in and then come back out. And it turned out that I just loved it. I ended up spending 6.5 years with Kearney, one of the original management consulting firms, nearly 100 years old. And then from there, went over to actually run marketing at Kin + Carta, a smaller digital transformation consultancy, for another 3 years. And we've just been acquired by Valtech and starting fresh.
Yes, and congratulations on the recent acquisition, and also for being named, if you did not see this before watching the show, but Gartner's CMO of the Year. That is so exciting.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's
absolutely. We're definitely going to dive in a little bit to that. But one of the things you said in your journey is that you just fell in love with that startup culture, the late nights, the being obsessed with your client. And I do think that's something that, one, I feel like any small company that's maybe slightly chaotic just gets called a startup. And that's not really true. But there is this difference in culture. And so I'm just curious to hear how you would encourage people, like, not every culture is right for every person. You know, how do you kind of reflect or be honest with yourself of like, this is a cool company, I like what we're doing, but maybe this type of culture is just not right for me?
I love that question. And I also feel a little sad because I feel like this remote work has changed a lot of what we were able to experience in that like really tight knit, like we're in this together, where you have those moments where you're late in the office or finishing a project that just don't
those 11 o'clock, order pizza,
yes,
solving a problem. Yeah, race to the finish. Oh, there's nothing better.
Loved it. There's nothing better. Yes. And I feel like the marketers that lived in that time, like those are our core memories. And some of my best friends were made over late nights on a conference floor,
Yep. They call it like a trauma bond, but it doesn't have to be trauma. But like when you go through that together, I mean, yes, I have some lifelong friends from those office days.
Totally. But, I just read this really interesting book called Culture Shock. The impetus for me even picking up a book like that is we had actually decided at Kin + Carta that the employee value proposition, the employee experience actually makes the most sense to sit with marketing. And I ended up taking that over because of this realization. It was actually a hypothesis at the time, and then it turned into a realization that we proved out. But a really good employee experience that gets people bonded around a similar purpose, a purpose that has like real deep meaning, a genuine purpose, not just a like a statement on a website, but something that means something, that bonds people together, that creates culture, that permeates through everything, all of a sudden those people show up on the client site and they couldn't be happier to be there. And then the client's like, well, this is great. I love working with these people because they love what they do. So it really, it has an upstream effect when you create that kind of culture. And anyways, this book, Culture Shock, I found it really interesting. It says that company culture is the single greatest leadership challenge of our time, which is not super surprising. And they lay out a path within the book that basically directly tracks employee experience all the way up to your share price increasing.
Yep.
It's amazing.
I spent 5.5 years in the employee engagement land. But yeah, I mean, it is really interesting that you guys made a conscious decision to let that sit in marketing, which I'm sure any HR person that might listen to this would be like, hey now, this is, come on, this is the fun part of my job.
I know,
it's not just compliance. What do you mean marketing is taking over culture? But, I think it can be a great partnership, depending on your structure. And also if you're a product versus a service company, because as an agency or as a consulting firm, yes, you're delivering a strategy or a slide deck or a blog post or whatever it looks like. But ultimately, your people are your product.
Yep.
And if they are bought in, you're hiring correctly, they're obsessed with delivering that end result, that is also your brand and making sure that. So, I mean, I do think it looks a little different than, but ultimately, that's why I interned at ExactTarget, which, if you are not familiar, was purchased by Salesforce back in the day. One of the bigger acquisitions. It's now been eclipsed. But it was one of the first companies that when they IPO'd, one of the 3, unique value props of why they were going public, it was their culture. It was their people. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time that had ever really been stated as a financial benefit to folks. And so love to see that there's now, a study that can directly correlate that.
Do you know what I love about you saying that? So ExactTarget, I used ExactTarget many, many moons ago. And ExactTarget had these community groups, user groups that used to meet and get together of just power users of the platform. And I think what you're saying about that really great company culture, it bled into a really strong customer culture where they were so bought in, we were so bought into it that we were willing to actually organize around a tool and bring people together to talk about that tool and the impact it can have. That's exactly what we're saying. That's a great example.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's such a hard thing because you can look at it, and of course, again, not to go too deep in the ExactTarget use case, but they defined it with a color. It was orange. It was the logo, but everyone knew orange was the definition of the culture. And I do feel like there was this trend after that where I feel like people kept trying to find the next color, or people were trying to but they were forcing it. So as a marketer, how do you authentically build that culture where it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel manufactured or overly commercialized, but it's authentic and can actually be felt by your clients?
Yeah. I mean, for us at Kid & Carta, which is where I've had the most recent experience with building this, we did it all around purpose. And we actually used our purpose statement as our brand strapline, which is not the natural place for a purpose statement. Usually it sort of sits in the back. It's somewhere on your desktop screen that, the IT department pushes to you. But for us, it was everything. And everything was built around it. And it wasn't just lip service. So that laddered all the way up to, it became a part of our strategic goals. As a company, we put out 3 what we called big, heroic, audacious goals. BHAGs.
Thank you for not using Harry.
Yes, no, we...
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Heroic. And we put them out into the world, and they were all around the triple bottom line, which is what meant the most to us. There was a people, a performance, and a planet goal. And one of those goals was to be an internationally recognized best place to work. And that starts with culture, and that starts at the top. The other one was to be the very first B Corp listed on the London Stock Exchange. To be a public company that says we are a triple bottom line business that means the most to us, which was the essence of our purpose, that takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of work and a culture to back it up. And so each one of these goals it required the culture to make it happen, and it required people to be bought into it. But I think the biggest takeaway there is it doesn't happen by itself. It's not an accident. The company has to say, culture is a strategic imperative. It is one of our goals, and we are all working towards it.
Absolutely. If you are not familiar what it takes to become a B Corp, take 5 minutes and Google it, because it is a lengthy, very intensive process.
Yes.
And a lot of people will do the best places to work, or let's just do this application. And, we back in the day used to call best places like HR for PR, because it wasn't always rooted in meaningful, systematic culture being there. I mean, it is a great thing, don't get me wrong. There is a component where employees have to share their voice, and it can definitely prohibit. But the B Corp, it is, how many of your vendors are diverse, sustainability for the planet. I mean, there's so many components that you can't kind of bluff your way through. It has to be really ingrained. And it's sometimes not even a 1 year commitment. Like, in order to qualify, you have to have years of data to show for it.
Yeah, no, it was a huge undertaking. And I think probably the coolest part about it is each time you recertify, because you have to keep recertifying. It's not like you get it and you're done. Each time you have to recertify, you need to get better. You have to get better and better. And it pushes you to just continue to create the company that you want to be, to create the world that you want to live in. So it meant a lot to us. And that's what we built our culture around.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So then let's talk content in that. You have, great people. Ideally, this is creating those advocate customers. You're building this kind of unshakable brand foundation of things. But then how does that come alive in the content you're creating, whether that's webinars, videos, written content, etc.? But where's that weave of the two?
I think there's a couple answers to this. And I think this is a fun one, because I bet a lot of marketers get similar questions or similar pushes from the sales team. I used to get the question a lot, hey, I'm going to LinkedIn and all I see is stuff about us, like a sustainability project or like a people profile story. Why aren't you talking about what we actually do?
Yep.
And I'm sure a lot of marketers get that same type of question. And so obviously, like, we work in buckets, but what means a lot to people in social media is those feel-good stories. And so from a content perspective, we put a really concerted effort around how do we develop people stories? How do we tie those people stories to demand? So an example of that is if we knew that we needed to hire, we had a lot of projects coming in for data engineers. We're going to go out and we're going to find super interesting, really diverse data engineers within our organization and tell their story, make them the heroes of everything, and write these really great posts about them and put them out on LinkedIn. Or if we know that we have a really great agriculture prospect that we're going to be pitching, let's go out and find the people that have worked in ag for the last 5 years and write these great stories about their experience there. It's all very strategic and tied to demand in some way, whether that's on the supply side or on the client side. But it's telling the narrative that is most interesting to people. And then once you get people engaged with that content on LinkedIn, the algorithm starts to realize, oh, they really like you. They like your content. They're engaging with your content. Their networks are engaging with your content. Now, when you put out the post about,
Best practices.
Exactly. Like Gen AI, all of a sudden that shows up the way that it should. So I think that from a purpose perspective, we were okay leaning into that kind of content and letting more of the capability content sit almost secondary a little bit, understanding that that's what people wanted to hear about.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like you're taking, of course, founder-led LinkedIn thought leadership is kind of the biggest trend right now. Mm-hmm. All executives and thought leaders should be posting on LinkedIn. And I feel like the mistake they make is feeling like, oh, I have to be talking about some big revolutionary thought leadership post every time I post something. And that often leads to a lot of noise. It leads to a lot of things that kind of make people just roll their eyes and be like, okay, is that really helpful or additive? Probably not. Versus just sharing authentic stories. Eventually there will be that really provocative thought or something that is genuinely helpful related to your product, but now that feels authentic to all of the other stories you've built. And I feel like we need to take that same approach with our company brands as well. Is like, what's that split of educational, what I'll call like topic, product related messages, and some of that human story as well.
Totally. And I think with this real push in technology, people kind of forget that we were selling and marketing before any of this existed. And at the end of the day, the one thing that really hasn't changed is people like working with people that they like. So
100%.
you have to have that connection with folks. And so I think that's a really good place to start.
It is. I mean, we love our acronyms in marketing. So, B2C, B2B, it's business to human, regardless of where you're going. Like, it is a human on the other end of your blog, podcast, webinar, social post. And how are you authentically relating to them? It's a great reminder.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about kind of starting internal and really understanding your purpose, the vision, making sure every employee is aligned to that vision. What about how you bring in the customer voice to that and really define those personas and making sure they're, because you're so purpose driven, do you look for clients that share your purpose?
That's not how we did it. So our purpose at Kin + Carta at the time, and again, we were just recently acquired by Valtech. It was to build a world that works better for everyone. And some people can interpret that as, I'm only going to be working on these non-for-profit, but that's not really it. The reality of the world is that the world keeps moving. People have to grocery shop. People have to fill their car with gas. These are the things that just have to happen all the time. So how can we make it better in any one of those situations for folks? If we're working on a point of sale software or user experience, how do we make that as seamless as humanly possible? How do we bring in that extra little nugget where, did we think about the accessibility of this for somebody who maybe is blind? Did we think about the automated voice that's coming across? Does it need to be a certain gender? Why did we choose that gender? So we're trying to take it that next step of trying to give that little bit of better, this commitment to just making things a bit better for the world and for everyone. So it wasn't necessarily working with companies that always had a matching purpose, but helping them to just be a little bit better for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. If you can just leave it a little bit better than when you found it, then you achieved your purpose. Did you share the purpose with clients as part of the sales process and as part of the philosophy of what you were trying to help them accomplish?
Yes, it really was a part of everything that we did. We actually had just recently launched a new rebranding campaign where we pulled in the triple bottom line to all of our branding, and we had colors associated with each one of those things. So when we were telling a story that was about the planet, it had a completely different look and feel than when we were telling a story about our people or when we were talking about the performance of the company. So we wanted to make sure that those things were balanced. And if you came to our LinkedIn profile or you came to our website, you were experiencing all three parts of us because they're all three really important pieces to the puzzle.
That is really cool. But I want to change gears a bit. You mentioned all of this purpose work that you did at Kin + Carta. You were recently acquired by Valtech. What happens to that? Can you share a little bit about that transition process and how you're keeping the core of your purpose and now just bringing it into this new organization?
Yeah. So for anybody that's been through an acquisition process, or if you haven't, it's kind of like The Bachelor for any of my Bachelor Nation out there. You have to both choose. And it's not just like somebody pops up and says they want to buy you and you say, oh, okay, and you go for it. There really is this, it's like a courtship. And is this going to work? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
Okay, I know they're cutting the street. That's terrific. Okay.
Mom, look out the window.
I will. I'm so sorry. Awesome, go watch it. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Do not apologize. I love that's so authentic. That's where we are today. That's
my 4-year-old. There's digger trucks outside. It's the most exciting thing that could have possibly happened.
Yes. Of course it is. It's the best day of his life.
Yes. So for anybody who's been through an acquisition, it is kind of a courtship, honestly. And you have to find is this going to work for us? Is this a culture match? Not just, is this a profitable decision? That obviously is a part of it. Is this the best thing for our shareholders? But is it the best thing for all of our stakeholders, which includes all of your employees? And so when we were in discussions with Valtech, their core values essentially aligned directly to our core values. And so we're moving into an organization whose values are share, care, and dare. And at the heart of it, that's great. And no matter what, you can build a purpose-driven culture around really core values. How do you actually have these values that permeate across cultures?
As a sales and marketing leader, I'm always interested to hear about a team's tech stack. At Composely, we use Apollo with HubSpot to fuel our outbound outreach. My team loves it. It consistently provides accurate contact information and is incredibly user-friendly. If you're thinking about changing your data provider or just want to hear more about our experience, connect with me on LinkedIn or check out the link in the show notes of this episode. Improve your inbound, increase conversion, and keep your marketing database squeaky clean with Apollo. So you guys have been on a really good path. Obviously an award-winning agency, an award-winning leader on the call with us right now. We all know 2023 was really interesting in the fact that a lot of things shifted for buyers, market conditions changed. Feels like 2024 is starting to normalize, but it is kind of this quote-unquote new normal. Curious from your seat, like what do you think are some of those shifts that have happened with buyers?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and probably something that's on the minds of every B2B marketer right now in particular. Yeah. I think that the changing buying behavior is the biggest opportunity area for marketing right now. And there's really a few things that are happening that are all coming together. So there's a whole new generation that's stepping into the decision-making seat. And they, like we want to receive information differently. We want to assess options differently. And we want to make decisions differently than our predecessors did. And on top of that, technology is changing so fast that companies, they're just not as keen on making these really big purchases that are going to take a long time to implement, because by the time it's done, they're already behind on the next big thing. So they want to work in these faster sprints and be more flexible. And then additionally, the economy is still not so hot. So any purchases that people are making are being scrutinized. I know my own purchases are being scrutinized across a growing buying committee, which is always inclusive of the CFO, I feel like at this point, even for something that might seem small at the time. This is really generalizing, but as marketers, I feel like we have historically looked at content in three major buckets. So, how do we make sure that buyers know how smart and good we are? Thought leadership. How do we make sure buyers can find us when they need to have their problem solved? Thought leadership with a focus on SEO. And then how do we make sure buyers know exactly what our capabilities are and how those capabilities will solve their challenge? That's product or offering content mixed with sales enablement. And then we'd create all this great content. We'd do all the work to get it in front of the right buyers at the right time. Bada bing, bada boom, there's a purchase, high five with sales, we close the deal, everything's good. And that's not happening anymore. The reason is we really need to realize how much we are asking of a decision maker to actually buy from us. To take that on within their organization is asking them to dedicate significant time and effort and possibly like all of the political capital that they've built up to advocate for us. So why would somebody do that? What is it that would make them do that for you? And how do we set them up for success? And not just for our own sake, but for their own career. And this is where I think that marketing should be honing in on buyer enablement content. It's a whole new bucket of content that we can own. How do we create things that coach people in how to buy what we sell and what questions to ask up front and even what competitors to consider and how we would differ from them? How do they get buy-in and from whom, and how to have a successful onboarding process, et cetera, because in the end, the very worst thing that can happen, even worse than like a flat out no, is a poor experience during the buying process. That would lead to an exhausted and completely disengaged stakeholder, which leads to a lower quality project or implementation, which leads to a less than ideal client experience and ultimately a very low lifetime value for that customer. And so I'm really loving this opportunity for buyer enablement content. I think it is like the most important opportunity area for marketing to have like the greatest impact.
I couldn't agree more. I think if you are a marketer and have not read The Jolt Effect, which is the part 2 book from the Challenger sale, and the same authors did a bunch of research from Zoom calls, so positive of COVID, but suddenly all of the sales calls went virtual. And they took all of this data, and what they found is there is moments in sales where you are supposed to push and be a challenger and question the status quo. But what they're finding is that if a buyer is actually afraid of making a decision, pushing the status quo will only push them further into indecision. And then it's more about how you reduce the risk, their internal capital. What if they bring you in and this fails? They would rather miss out on the big, shiny 10x that you can promise than bring you in and it fails and they have egg on their face 3, 6, 9 months later. And that is a huge difference that I feel like we haven't quite caught up yet in sales and marketing.
And I don't know, but I just wonder if this ties even back to the culture conversation we're having with everybody going remote too. People don't have the same kinds of deep connection with their coworkers and with the leaders within their organization because they don't see them in the same way.
Oh, that's brilliant.
There's not the random,
hallway conversation.
Exactly. They don't know about your personal life. They don't see you every day and can ask you questions. I wonder if that's part of it.
Well, and I never thought about that, but the number of times I pitch something in the 45 seconds I could grab from a CRO, CEO, CFO when in an office, and now you have to have that skill set of laying out exactly the business case, give them enough information to let them know you've thought of everything. You have to anticipate their questions. They're going to make that decision based on that email or based on that Slack. Versus when I could grab a minute to like tee up, say, hey, I'll follow up with everything, but I could kind of guide them is way different.
Yep.
And that's such a good point.
It's an interesting time. We're in an interesting time.
It is an interesting time. The other thing you mentioned that I thought was so good is the coach them how to buy. I will say it in a lot of sales calls. And my favorite question to ask is, hey, you're looking at various options. What is your decision criteria? What are you evaluating? And the number of people who genuinely are like, oh, this is the first time I'm thinking about this, like genuinely thinking about it before I get into this call. And they're like, oh, and suddenly I'm now helping them think about all of the different things they should think about. I will offer something. Hey, do you care about this? Is this something that you're interested in? And now you do kind of control that for anyone else that they talk to because no one else has asked them. But being transparent, saying, okay, oh, you're talking to them. They are really good at that. And if that is your number one thing, like, ooh, but we're really good at this. And so if that's more important, I think we'd be a great fit. And sometimes you kind of have to be willing to not say you're good at everything to build that trust.
Yeah. And actually, if you shouldn't win that work, you shouldn't win the work because the experience is not going to be good and they're never going to come back to you. But if you're upfront and honest and you help them and you help their career, I think they'll come back to you at some point when they have the project that's right for you. And this is really like, gosh, full circle again. I mean, it comes back to like, what is your purpose and what is your culture and what drives you every day in every decision that you make? And if it's to make the world a little bit better or to share, care, and dare, whatever that is, make sure you're living it and that your clients feel it.
Well, and I think something else you brought up is people are craving more flexibility now. And I think we saw that. I mean, I saw so many people go through it where you got locked in, especially in tech, but you got locked into a year or 2-year contract and you have to like sell your right arm in order to try and get out of it. And it was like, nope, there's no opt-outs. There's no flexibility. Like you signed up, we have you in contract. You're kind of SOL. And I feel like that has really made people, when times were a little dire or they needed to try and find opportunities to be more frugal, they couldn't get out of these contracts. And now everyone is so sensitive of signing anything long term. And so it does kind of go back to, like, if you have a good product, why do you feel the need to lock them in? Is it just because shareholders like having ARR, which of course we love ARR, MRR, whatever you're looking at. But if you have that good experience, trusting that maybe more flexibility is actually why you will be the preferred vendor.
Yep. And give people the chance to build trust in you. I know every year Trust Radius puts out a really great report. I don't know the stats offhand from this year, but typically when buyers are looking at their criteria, they're looking for some sort of like free trial, whatever that means in your ecosystem, the way that you sell. There has to be a way for somebody to try before they buy. That's how we all buy everything. Like clothes, I want to be able to try it before I buy it. A car. I mean,
or I want to be able to return it.
I'd like to be able to return it if I don't like it, if it's not working for me. And I want real transparency. Like, what is this going to cost me? What is it going to take? Like, don't sugarcoat it. Because if we get on the other end and it's not what I expected, that's on you. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking about this new bucket of buyer enablement, how can you give a little bit of that try before you buy in marketing collateral so that sales doesn't even have to play that dance as much? Like they said, hey, I have seen XYZ. Is it a demo? I mean, this probably gets into the gate versus ungate debate a little bit. But
I'm firmly on the do not gate content side of the fence.
The try before you buy. Let them see it.
Yes, let them know. Like, people are going to do the research and just make it as easy as humanly possible for them. Like, I'm not trying to put any barriers to you figuring out that I can help you solve your problem, that I will be on your side, that I will be your friend and your advocate in all of this. I don't want to put any hurdles in front of that just to get your email address. It means nothing.
Well, I was going to say it's a metric issue, because we should be spending more time on CRO, making sure that if they are ready, they can find you. Mm-hmm. And less time about how many emails do I have in the database, how many emails have I sent to them, how many gated pieces of content have been downloaded. That's not really a sale. I saw a great LinkedIn post the other day, and it was just a laundry list of like, this is not an MQL.
Oh, I think I saw the same thing. I loved it.
And
yes.
Like clicking your email, not an MQL. Mm-hmm. Watching part of a YouTube video, not an MQL. And it really does make you remember, like, you want to be found, but you don't want to be pushy. Like, it is their sales process.
Yep.
If they don't want to come to you, they won't come to you.
Yep. One of the most effective things that I ever did was, people always talk about the buyer's journey and they map it out. But there's actually this decision maker's journey. And how does that map one-to-one with your sales funnel? Like, really think about, it's not what you are pushing towards them. You're not shoving people down a funnel anymore. It's a journey. And what does that decision-making journey look like? How do you feed into it at the right moments in time that actually show sales that? Like, it's not about us. It's actually about them. It's 100% about them. And how do we show up for them with what they need?
Well, I mean, this is not a sales podcast, but maybe it's turning into one, because too often I think you have your sales training and this is what you do at this moment, or you have to objection handle and XYZ. And I feel like the most successful sales reps I've worked with are probably what you would say are like the anti-sales reps. Like, they just genuinely care if they're not going to push. They're advocating internally. They're not trying to just get the largest contract they can. They're saying, oh, this feels like they don't really need this. I'm not going to include it. It's that trust that then ultimately wins them more in the end, versus like the desperation to get everything you can out of one opportunity.
Yeah. And then hopefully that seller and that buyer, they move from company to company together. And it opens up so many more doors for your organization.
Curious, do you have, or have you ever had a customer, not win back, but like when a customer leaves, not necessarily churn, but they get a new job or they get acquired and like that. Did you ever have a campaign in place to like stay in touch from a brand perspective with those clients going to new jobs?
We do try to. I think one of the best things that from a marketing perspective you can invest in is data hygiene. Like, find yourself a terrific data steward that is going through and checking records and seeing when people move on and making sure that that is up to date in your CRM, whether that's on the marketing side or the sales side. But somebody to check those records, it sounds so basic, but like, you got to do it. You have to do it so that you can keep that up to date.
It is, because I feel like recently I just realized like how often it happens when you're not tracking it, which just goes back to the power of data.
Yes.
So like, oh, you just hear in a conversation like, oh, they used to work with us 2 years ago and they've been at this new job and now they want to work with us again. And like, you don't capture that as a true opportunity of great, ideally, customer marketing and the delivery experience.
Yep.
I love that. Okay, so we're coming to the end. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Gartner CMO of the Year. I'd love just to hear, like, that's such a cool title, but like, what does that mean to you, to win that? If you have it, we'll post it with the show notes. If you haven't had a chance to watch Kerry's video, it was very inspiring and very heartfelt, an amazing story. So please go watch it. But what does it mean to you to have gone through this with your team? It definitely sounds like it was a team effort, but led with great vision. So I'd love to kind of hear the process a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it really has been a journey. When I got hired at Kin + Carta, so about 3 years ago, I was hired by the global CEO at the time, and he put me in this role. He said, you're going to be global head of marketing, but nobody reports to you. And it was all these different companies, 11 different boutique businesses that were all bought, jammed together, told to figure it out. And everybody had their own cultures, their own ways of doing things. There were totally separate marketing teams cruising in their own right. Nothing was together. And he said, make it work. And so that's like a really scary remit, like
Terrifying.
Okay. Terrifying.
Yeah.
I think probably the best thing that he said to me at the very beginning, because I asked him, why am I leaving a 90-year-old company and coming to a company I haven't heard of that is new? Like, just give it to me straight. And he said, I don't hire and I don't keep brilliant jerks. And that was like the most magical thing somebody could have said to me. It meant a lot. And it told me I can do a hard job if everybody around me is in it for the right reasons. And so that was sort of my, like, this is going to work. Even if it's going to be hard, it's going to work.
Yeah.
And over the course of the next 18 months, building relationships and trying to show people their similarities versus their differences, you fast forward and all of a sudden, we are this global team with 60% centralized centers of excellence, all working together with this culture, our own team culture, so strong. It could bring tears to your eyes how much we support each other from around the world. I mean, people in Argentina reporting into people who sit in the UK and having genuine relationship and connection and building really cool stuff, having total autonomy in their roles, full trust in each other. It really is something magical that we've been able to build. And putting together the application for this award, there were 400 applications. And so I'm beyond honored to be the name on the application, but it's not mine. I mean, it's this team. It took a lot of trust. It took a lot of time. And we have built something truly special, like really special. With a tiny, mighty team, we've rebranded, we've won awards, we've pulled together an entire organization, we've changed the way in which an entire demand organization tracks leads and uses the CRM. We've made huge progress. We've launched the first time ever always on brand awareness campaigns. We restructured to industries. I mean, we did like
everything.
A lot of stuff. We launched our first ever magazine, going back to content, like our first ever quarterly magazine, which is just incredible. It's called Thread. We've done a lot, and I feel super proud, and I'm hoping that the whole team realizes like this is their award. So I'm like blown away, to be honest.
Well, huge congratulations to you and the entire team, because yes,
Thank
it
you.
was very clear how much you value and how much you brought them into the submission as well, which I think was really cool to hear. about the story. The other piece of the submission was some of your personal story. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but maybe more high level. You know, you are, I'm going to say it, kick-ass mom.
Thank you.
Kick-ass marketer with 4 under 5. I'd just love to hear how you kind of maybe approach like your philosophy on the time management of kick-ass marketer and kick-ass mom at the same time.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I think probably the best thing I've ever done is just be super upfront right at the very beginning about what means the most to me. And so like day one, I come in and say, between the hours of 5 and 7, unless something is literally burning to the ground, please don't reach out to me. If it's the CEO or the CFO, I always pick up the phone.
Sure.
But please don't reach out to me.
Yeah, set the boundary.
I am with my family. We are having dinner. We are reading stories and doing bath time and bedtime and all the other things. And now all of a sudden, like 5-year-olds have activities too. So now you have to like drive places, which is a whole new world.
Yep.
But that's my like really sacred time. And people are super respectful. Like, don't be afraid to say, this is special to me. But then also give the rest of your team that same luxury. The first thing I ask people is, what is it that you need? Do you need to go and work out at noon every day because that makes you feel better? Do that. But tell me you're doing that.
Right.
Because
So
I don't want to bother
communicate the
you.
expectation.
Yeah. And it's not you telling me because you need my permission. I actually don't like when people ask me for permission for things. So I'm uncomfortable, but like, do what you need to do. I trust you entirely. That's why you're on this team. If I didn't trust you, you wouldn't be on the team. And so just don't be afraid to set your own boundaries, but give the exact same to your team so that they can set their own as well. And make your kids a part of it. Like, I mean, we're on this recording. I don't know if it'll make it into the cut.
And I actually kind of love it if you're comfortable with keeping it. I think it's just so human and honest, and
it's what happens.
Part of what's great.
It's what happens. And I think on a very personal note, it's amazing what happens when you share what's personally going on for you. So people will see it in the submission, but my 2-year-old Nolan, he has epilepsy, a very, very rare form of epilepsy that came just out of nowhere. And it was shocking. It was shocking for our family, and it took a toll. We were going through an acquisition process, and my husband and I both work full time, and all of a sudden we're sitting in a hospital. And how do you keep things moving? And for me, the only way to do that is to just be really open about it. And so, you know, I told obviously the executive team what was going on. I was going to be a little out of pocket, and I took people on that journey. And the most amazing thing happened. My CFO came to me and said, I'd like to take you to lunch and talk to you about my child that has epilepsy.
Wow.
My new global CEO said, I'd love to talk to you about my nephew who has epilepsy. There's a lot of people who can relate on a level that you just would never know if you didn't just open yourself up a little bit. I really believe that the personal makes the professional even better.
It's going back to that human, you know, something else in your submission was, of course, you learned some things for marketing, but how you were treated when you were just looking for support during a really scary time. And we can have a whole other podcast about the healthcare system for sure, but just looking for that support. And I feel like that's probably given you a whole different viewpoint of things. If I can ask, like, how is your son doing now? How are you guys?
It's a journey. I mean, I wish that there was more out there, and it's like my new
passion
personal project. Yes. There's so many children that have these rare genetic disorders that there's just no information. Nolan is one of 30 people in the world that has his documented genetic disorder. There's nothing that exists. And so, you know, the magic of social media and trying to find people to connect and share and learn and just try to find answers and some level of support. It's amazing what happens when you put yourself out there. But we're still working through it. He is such a strong little guy, and we're trying to find a solution. But he works hard every day, and we're so lucky and proud of him.
That's so incredible. Well, wishing nothing but the best, and we'll definitely be rooting for you guys and hoping that a solution comes. I know we're almost at time. Anything else that you were hoping to share? Any final advice that you leave our listeners with?
The best thing that I can leave marketers with is be confident in the seat that you deserve at the table. Own it. and bring strategy. I've told everybody who's ever worked with me, especially when it comes to content, read the content. As the marketer, read everything so that when you go to the table with your subject matter experts or your stakeholders, you are just as educated on the subject as they are. You have every right to be there and bring your ideas and your strategy. You're not just executing, you're not pushing things through a content process. Own the content, read the content, and really like dive in deep.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes, because it's hard, and sometimes the content marketer does not always get to sit in the sales meetings, the kickoff meetings, the product launches, but ask for it. You know, with call recording now, go listen to calls. It does make a huge difference. Ask for support, ask for help.
Yeah.
For this edition of Friends Matter, we want to recognize Catherine Campbell, founder of One for the Books based in Asheville, North Carolina. Catherine was nominated by one of their friends who couldn't say enough good things about the type of person Catherine is and the quality of their work with words like smart and cool and industrious. Catherine recently opened a new office in the River Arts District that was unfortunately decimated by the flooding in the Carolinas. So many folks have been significantly impacted by this tragedy, and Catherine has been working really hard to gather good information and resources for other artists, business owners, and marketers looking for support during this time. Catherine, thank you so much for stepping up and being a shining light for those in your community. We'll be including a few of the links that you've compiled in the show notes of this episode. So if you'd like to go and support the organizations, be sure to check those out, as well as follow Catherine on LinkedIn for some of the most recent information. And if you have an amazing friend like Catherine, be sure to nominate them at Composely/friends-matter. That's compose.ly/friends-matter. Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.